Victor Mercer had finally achieved his lifelong dream, building a stunning Mediterranean-style mansion in the prestigious Oak Ridge Estates. After retiring early from his successful tech company at 48, the self-made entrepreneur stood at the end of his cobblestone driveway, admiring the culmination of 18 months of meticulous planning and construction. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the terracotta roof tiles imported directly from Tuscany. Victor had visited Italy 3 times during the building process to personally select materials that would capture the authentic Mediterranean aesthetic he'd fallen in love with during his backpacking days across Europe in his 20s. Inside, the 8,000 square foot residence featured hand-carved marble columns from Carrara, Italian porcelain floors with radiant heating, and a grand circular staircase that served as the home's centerpiece. The state-of-the-art home automation system could be controlled entirely from Victor's custom smartphone app, from temperature and lighting to the invisible speakers embedded throughout the house that played back as he moved from room to room. But the true masterpiece lay in the rear of the property, a breathtaking infinity pool that appeared to spill directly into the valley below, creating the illusion that the water extended to the distant mountains. Adjacent to the pool stood a custom-built outdoor kitchen and dining area beneath a wisteria-covered pergola, the perfect spot for the dinner parties Victor had been looking forward to hosting. Before purchasing the 2-acre lot, Victor had spent weeks studying the Oak Ridge Estates HOA guidelines with his attorney. The 78-page document contained countless restrictions, from approved exterior paint colors to limitations on tree height. Victor had ensured every aspect of his design satisfied these requirements, submitting detailed plans that received unanimous approval from the Architectural Review Committee. As Victor wandered through his newly completed home, trailing his fingers along the cool stone countertops in the chef's kitchen, he felt a profound sense of contentment. This house represented not just his success, but the stable, beautiful home he'd never had growing up in foster care. It was to be his sanctuary for the decades ahead, a place to finally put down roots after years of corporate nomadism. He couldn't have known then how quickly his dream would become a nightmare, or that the HOA approval in his filing cabinet was worth less than the expensive paper it was printed on. 3 months after moving in, Victor returned from his morning jog to find a certified letter wedged prominently in his ornate mailbox. The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association emblem, a stylized oak leaf in gold foil, gleamed from the top corner of the envelope. Inside, a 4-page document itemized alleged violations of the community bylaws. According to Beatrice Whitmore, the iron-fisted HOA president, who had personally signed each page in tight, precise cursive, his home violated several obscure bylaws buried in subsections and addenda that hadn't been included in the guidelines Victor had reviewed. The primary offences: the shade of terracotta on his roof tiles was excessively vibrant, invoking an inappropriate resort atmosphere. His imported olive trees were classified as non-native invasive species with potential pollen concerns, and his wrought iron gate design was deemed ostentatious and incompatible with neighbourhood aesthetic continuity. The letter demanded immediate remediation within 30 days and included a $15,000 fine, $5,000 for each violation. A handwritten note in the margin specified that interest would accrue at 1.5% daily for any unpaid balance. Victor immediately scheduled a consultation with his attorney, Eleanor Jeffries, who specialized in real estate law. After reviewing the HOA documents, Eleanor frowned. "They've amended the bylaws twice since you purchased your lot," she explained, pointing to date stamps on the addenda. "Unfortunately, There's a clause that allows for emergency aesthetic amendments with only board approval, no homeowner vote required. Determined to resolve the matter reasonably, Victor attended the monthly HOA meeting held in the Oak Ridge Estates clubhouse, a building with aggressively beige decor and uncomfortable folding chairs. He arrived early, preparing his points on a legal pad, but noticed the frosty reception from the moment he entered. Beatrice, a silver-haired woman with immaculate posture and a perpetual expression of disapproval, sat centre at the board table, flanked by 4 equally stern-faced members. When Victor's appeal came up on the agenda, he presented his case methodically, pointing out that his plans had received prior approval and showing dated photographs from the construction process. Beatrice merely smiled thinly. The Architectural Review Committee's preliminary approval is always contingent on final inspection, Mr. Mercer. Section 17, paragraph 8. The vote to deny his appeal was unanimous, performed with such practiced efficiency that Victor realized this was a well-oiled machine of suburban tyranny, processing and dismissing homeowner concerns with assembly line precision. As he gathered his documents, Beatrice approached him. "We take pride in Oak Ridge Estates uniformity, Mr. Mercer," she said quietly. "Some people simply don't fit in." Over the next 6 months, the citations multiplied like weeds after a spring rain. Victor complied with the initial demands, repainting his gate a subdued charcoal, replacing the olive trees with board-approved magnolias, and even paying for specialized treatments to weather his roof tiles to a more acceptable dullness. The remediation costs alone exceeded $47,000. Yet compliance only seemed to embolden the HOA. Within days of completing one set of modifications, Victor would find another official notice, each more absurd than the last. His mailbox was 2 inches too tall. The decorative stones lining his garden beds were excessively varied in size and coloration. Even the custom brass house numbers were deemed inappropriately reflective during sunset hours. Beatrice began conducting what she termed emergency aesthetic inspections of his property, arriving unannounced with a digital camera and measuring tape. Victor would spot her from his home office window, meticulously photographing every corner of his property, occasionally accompanied by different board members who nodded gravely at whatever she pointed out. The fines increased exponentially. What began as $15,000 became $50,000, then $120,000. Victor's attorney filed injunctions that disappeared into the labyrinthine county court system, perpetually delayed by procedural technicalities. One evening, while retrieving his trash bins, Victor's neighbour Gerald Walsh, a retired accountant who rarely spoke to anyone, approached him furtively. "They did this before, you know," Gerald whispered, glancing around nervously. "The Abernethys had that beautiful colonial revival on Sycamore Lane. The Hendersons built that Japanese-inspired place with the authentic tea garden. And the Petals, lovely family, had that award-winning contemporary home featured in Architectural Digest. All gone within a year. What happened to them?" Victor asked. "Driven out. Fines, harassment, property damage mysteriously not covered by insurance. They all sold at losses, to shell companies that later flipped the properties at massive profits." Gerald hurried back to his modest home before Victor could ask more questions. The final straw came during Victor's 3-day business trip to Seattle. He'd retained a security company after finding his imported cypress trees inexplicably dying, their trunks drilled and filled with herbicide. The security firm called him midway through a crucial meeting. "Sir, there's a demolition crew here with HOA authorization paperwork. They're removing your backyard structures." Victor rushed home to find his custom-built gazebo, the one where he planned to host his first dinner party, reduced to splintered wood and broken stone. The koi pond lay empty, the rare Japanese fish nowhere to be found. Both structures had been explicitly approved in his original plans. Taped to his front door was a notice: unauthorized additions removed per Section 23 of covenant restrictions. Removal costs of $28,500 added to existing fines. That evening, as Victor surveyed the splintered remains of his gazebo, something inside him shifted. The tech entrepreneur who had built $1 billion cybersecurity company from his garage apartment hadn't succeeded by accepting defeat. He'd won by changing the game when the current one wasn't winnable. "Time to play offense," he muttered, pulling out his phone. Victor contacted Morgan Chen, his former head of corporate intelligence, a woman legendary for her ability to uncover competitors' secrets during acquisitions. Though retired like Victor, Morgan agreed to take on what she called an interesting challenge in suburban warfare. Within days, she assembled a team of 3, a forensic accountant, a real estate specialist, and a former FBI investigator specializing in white-collar crime. For the next 6 weeks, they operated for a rented office in the neighboring town. They requisitioned public records, conducted background checks, interviewed former residents, and followed money trails through a labyrinth of LLCs and offshore accounts. Victor authorized unlimited resources, telling Morgan, "Find me leverage." What they uncovered was more calculated than Victor had imagined. Beatrice's husband, Theodore Whitmore, owned Pristine Properties LC, which held exclusive contracts for all landscaping, maintenance and construction in Oak Ridge Estates, at rates 40% above market value. The previous year alone, his company had received $1.2 million for services that should have cost half that amount. Board member Douglas Fletcher, a real estate agent, had quietly listed and sold all 3 homes that Gerald had mentioned, each purchased initially by different shell companies that traced back to a single holding company, Oak Ridge Investments. This company was jointly owned by Beatrice, Douglas, and the HOA treasurer, Patricia Knowles. They target high-end homes, manufacture violations, drive out the owners, buy low, renovate using Theodore's company with HOA funds, and sell high, Morgan explained, pointing to a complex flowchart. They've cleared over $4 million in 5 years. Most troubling was the HOA's legal structure. Unlike most homeowners associations, Oak Ridge Estates HOA was established as a private corporation that actually owned all common areas, including the roads, parks, and crucially, the rights to the underground aquifer supplying water to all properties. "Here's your opening," Morgan said, sliding a financial statement across the table. They've been so focused on their scam that they've mismanaged the actual financials. The HOA is carrying $3.7 million in debt from a clubhouse renovation that went significantly over budget. They're behind on payments, and their lender, First Regional Bank, is getting nervous. Victor studied the documents, a slow smile spreading across his face. "So they're vulnerable." "Extremely," Morgan confirmed. "You don't need to fight the HOA. You need to own it." Victor sequestered himself in his home office for 3 days with his former CFO, Julia Winters, and corporate attorney Marcus Reed. The 3 had built Mercertech together, and Victor trusted them implicitly. On butcher paper taped across his walls, they mapped out a multi-pronged strategy that Julia dubbed Operation HOA Checkmate. "First, we need to remain invisible," Marcus advised. "If Beatrice catches wind of this, she'll find ways to block us." They established 5 separate shell companies across 3 states, each with distinct business identities and representation. Waterview Capital approached First Regional Bank and began purchasing tranches of the HOA's debt at a discount, leveraging the bank's concerns about repayment. Within 6 weeks, Waterview controlled 67% of the HOA's outstanding loans. Simultaneously, Horizon Properties began discreetly approaching homeowners who had received HOA citations in the past year. Victor's team had identified 17 homeowners who had experienced similar harassment patterns. "We're investors looking for properties in Oak Ridge Estates," the representatives would explain. "We're willing to pay 10% above market value, cash offer, no contingencies, close in 2 weeks." For homeowners already considering moving due to HOA harassment, the offers were irresistible. Within 3 months, Victor's entities owned 41% of the neighbourhood's 76 properties. The third prong of the strategy involved Oak Ridge Water LLC, which filed paperwork challenging the HOA's water rights based on a technical violation of county water regulations that Marcus had uncovered. This created legal pressure that further strained the HOA's resources. Victor remained carefully out of sight during the entire process, communicating only through secure channels. He continued paying his fines, now exceeding $200,000, to avoid arousing suspicion while the pieces moved into place. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for April 15th at the Oak Ridge Estates clubhouse. Victor watched from his car as representatives from his various companies arrived separately, carrying proxy voting authorizations and legal documentation. Inside, Beatrice called the meeting to order, unaware that her reign was minutes from ending. When the voting portion began, Douglas Fletcher announced the agenda's first item: election of board officers for the coming fiscal year. A woman in a crisp navy suit stood up. Sophia Reynolds, representing Waterview Capital. As holder of the majority of Oak Ridge Estates debt obligations, we exercise our contractual right to nominate a slate of board candidates. Beatrice's face paled. That's not possible. There's no such provision. Section 42, paragraph 7 of your loan covenants, Sophia stated calmly, sliding documents to the current board secretary. Additionally, as proxy representatives for 41% of property owners, combined with our debt position, we hold controlling interest. Only then did Victor step into the room, walking slowly to the front as whispers rippled through the assembly. The colour drained completely from Beatrice's face as recognition dawned. "Hello, Beatrice," Victor said quietly. "I believe there's been a change in management." The following morning, Victor sat at the head of the newly established Oak Ridge Estates Management Board, flanked by 5 homeowners who had suffered similar harassment. The boardroom, previously decorated with Beatrice's collection of pastoral oil paintings, now featured framed copies of the original neighbourhood covenant and a large sign reading "Fairness, Transparency, Community." "Our first order of business," Victor announced to the packed room, "is the immediate dissolution of all outstanding fines issued in the past 18 months, pending independent review." The applause was thunderous. Several elderly residents dabbed at their eyes. His second motion established a new architectural review committee with clear, objective guidelines. The third created an appeals process requiring a panel of 5 randomly selected homeowners to review contested decisions. By noon, they had rewritten the most restrictive bylaws and scheduled elections for permanent board positions in 60 days. That afternoon, Victor hired back the original landscape architect who had designed his gardens, along with a master carpenter to rebuild the gazebo, this time with a larger footprint and enhanced water features. The koi were replaced with rare specimens imported from Japan, each fish worth more than the ridiculous fines he had once been charged. 1 week later, certified letters arrived at the homes of Beatrice, Douglas, Patricia, and the other former board members. Each detailed multiple violations of HOA bylaws, using the exact same obscure regulations they had weaponized against others. From improper mailbox heights to excessive homogeneity in landscape design, the letters mimicked the petty tyranny it had once employed. The panic was immediate. Beatrice arrived at Victor's door the next morning, a binder of defense materials clutched to her chest. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "These rules are arbitrary, excessive, selectively enforced." Victor finished for her. I couldn't agree more. Instead of pursuing his advantage, Victor invited the former board members to a neighborhood reconciliation meeting. Under a tent on the community green, with catering from a local restaurant owned by one of the homeowners they had forced out, Victor announced a complete amnesty. "We're not continuing the cycle," he declared. "Every homeowner deserves dignity and security in their home. The only condition: the former board members were permanently banned from serving in any HOA capacity." When Beatrice began to protest, Victor quietly handed her a folder containing Morgan's complete investigation findings. "The county prosecutor found this very interesting," he said softly. "They've agreed to suspend any investigation as long as the new policies remain in place." Months later, as summer turned to fall, Beatrice would stand at her kitchen window each morning, coffee cup clutched tightly in her hand, staring at Victor's fully restored property. The new gazebo, twice the size of the original, stood prominently in her sightline. The sound of water from the expanded koi pond provided a constant background melody, while the laughter from Victor's frequent neighborhood gatherings drifted through her windows, a daily reminder that sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms.